did you get started in composing music?
Oh, man. I'm going to make this as short as I can, but it's hard. But I'll give you the quick lowdown. I had played music all my life. When I was in university, I would play piano a lot, and people would ask if I had a record, and I didn't. And I started playing drums in a band, and one of the guys in the band and I became really good friends, and he was taking audio engineering classes. And he said, if we come in and we sneak in and when the university's closed, we can record your album. I made 3 solo piano records by paying the engineers with beer and pizza between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. And when I was doing the third one, I was about 22, finishing school, and this engineer goes, have you ever heard of MIDI? And I was like, no, what's that? He's coming to this other studio. So I went to this other studio. MIDI is music motion digital interface. I went to this other studio, and he goes, play one of your songs. I played it on a keyboard, and I saw notation going up on the screen, and then I didn't read music, and I was like, whoa, that's a great communicator. And then he goes, all right, here's the sound of a flute, and I played the flute along with the piano, and he goes, how did you know how to play that? And I go, I don't know, I just heard it, and there's just some strings, and I played the strings along with the flute and piano, and he goes, like, first time through, and he goes, did you plan this? And I go, no, and I go, I don't want to sound crazy, but I've always heard all this in my head whenever I play piano. And then I decided right then and there, I was like, I'm going to write a symphony. And I don't know why, because I had no classical background or training, but about a year or two later, a year and a half later, I was walking in downtown Seattle, and they were building a symphony hall, an entire city block long and wide. It was a construction site. And I walked into the Seattle Symphony's office and I basically said, hi, my name is Mateo Messina. I'm putting together my first orchestra. I'd love to debut. I said, I'm putting together an orchestra. I'd love to debut my first symphony here. And they're like, what? What are your credits? And by that time, I had some piano CDs. And at any rate, I had to jump a bunch of hoops for like insurance deposit, and they co-produced with me. And then they said, okay, we look forward to seeing you in 7 months when we open. And I was like, oh shit, I got to figure out how to write a symphony. So I booked myself, but I didn't do it yet. Sold my mountain bike, bought a nice keyboard, went to get the MIDI software, and back then it was prohibitively expensive. So I called up a MIDI company and said, hey, I can't read music, but I think I can write a symphony using your software. If I put presented by you guys on my tickets, would you give me your software? They're like, absolutely. And then I ended up writing the concert. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't even know, like I wrote all the piano sketches, and when it came time to put the orchestra on, I didn't even know what the instruments of the orchestra were. So I went and got a book on the orchestra for kids, and it was brilliant because it had pictures, and which I loved. And it would show me like the trumpet, and then it would actually that was the day I learned there's a brass section, wind section, string section, and percussion section. and it showed like it would show a trumpet, then it would show the piano range of where that trumpet played. And so I took a piece of masking tape and wrote trumpet low, trumpet high with a Sharpie below the keys on the keyboard. And I did that for French horn and oboe and clarinet, and all my brass on my winds, and I basically figured out how to write for the orchestra, and I played it all by ear. And then I went out and recruited a bunch of students to come out and play, and my first concert went pretty well. By Monday of my second concert, we sold out for the next weekend's show. And so that was when I thought, well, maybe I'll try something different. And that's when a friend who I had known from years before was going to Academy of Arts in San Francisco, and he made a film, and he goes, hey, would you write music for my film? And I said, I don't really know how to do that. And he goes, you didn't even know how to write a symphony a year ago, and you figured it out? I was like, okay. I tried it. I fell in love with it, just absolutely fell in love with it. And then I went to every single film scoring session possible that was in Seattle, and they scored a lot of films in Seattle at the time. So usually at least once or twice a week I could go up and sneak on. Not even sneak. I mean, the contractors knew who I was, what I wanted to do, so I would learn from like Elmer Bernstein and Angelo Badalamenti and all these great composers that would come up and record there. And I would have a little notepad, and I would go, oh, that's interesting. I like how the viola instrument section doubles these woodwinds, and I kind of taught myself orchestration there. And then it wasn't until Angelo Badalamenti sat me down and said, I hear you want to be a film composer. And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, what are you doing in Seattle? You got to move to Hollywood. So 6 months later, I moved to Hollywood, and I worked for a short film company called Adam Films, and I started they would acquire these films, but they didn't have enough money for the rights of the music, so they'd ask if I could rescore them. And what it did is it introduced me to great directors like Jason Reitman and a friend Colin McGinnis, like all these different directors that I worked with then, that some of them I still work with now. And it was a great proving ground because I was working on tons of short films. Then I started doing it for Universal's division called Hypnotic and another one at Fox called Fox Search Labs. And I just worked with all these young, up-and-coming directors while I was young, up-and-coming composer. And then it wasn't until, I don't know, about a decade ago, and Jason was making Juno, and he sent me the script, and my oldest brother and his wife were adopting, so I intimately understood it, and then got that lucky break because I'd done features by then, but not like a studio feature, and that little film kind of launched all of our careers.
So your approach to music is actually it's just all in your it's all in your head. You just immediately know music, unlike other people that, like myself, I had to learn it over many years and I'm still not very good at it. You just have that natural gift for it. How easy is that to explain to someone when you're trying to, if you've ever tried to teach someone that? How do you go about sharing your knowledge about music if you have that natural inclination for it?
Well, two things to that. I mean, that's actually a really good question. First of all, I was learning all my life, though. It just wasn't the same way you learned. I was learning by sitting down at a piano every day since I was 3 years old. Like my brothers, I had two older brothers, neither of them really took to the piano, but I loved it. And I played all the time. I was just fascinated by it. And then when I was old enough to have a paper route, probably 12 or 13, and I'm old, so I went out and got like this little 4-track and a mixer, and I was fascinated with production. And, I look back and I think like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like I even said, I wasn't really into music for a little while. Then one of my friends goes, you used to carry a keyboard with you as we walked home from school. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I was, And so it wasn't that I was learning from a book or an instructor, but like by the time I developed my ear well enough, like by the time I was like 11 or 12, I would like listen to Michael Jackson's Off the Wall, and then I would learn every song, or I'd listen to the Beatles' White Album and learn every song by playing it by ear on the piano. And so when I believe a lot of people have an ear, and I know that's a talent, some people have it, some people don't. I've never tried to teach people. I've more just tried to encourage people in that you don't have to conform to what is, I'm trying the best way to put it, what people know of as education. There are other ways to learn. I didn't learn orchestration through, what's the book everybody reads for orchestration? What's that composer I'm thinking about? He's Russian.
Tchaikovsky?
No. I'll think of it in a second. At any rate, I learned a lot of orchestration by watching great film composers come up and build their scores, where I would actually sit in the studio room with the orchestra, and I just do takes, and then I'd be looking up at the screen and seeing what they're seeing and going, oh, that's how they write, to this emotion. And if anything, when I work with my clients, my directors, and I always tell them, this isn't a musical conversation. This is just an emotional conversation. So don't worry. I got so many directors go, I don't really know music very well. And I'm like, actually, you do. But I go, but it's okay. You don't have to. Our conversation is emotional. And so when I talk to aspiring composers, I talk to them a lot about like how to translate emotion and communicate emotion through what you do, and a lot about instincts. I'm a big believer in that. Your instincts will drive you to where, if you're a human being and you understand how other human beings feel, and you know what it feels like to have your heart broken, then when you have a character on screen that has their heart broken, you're going to be able to feel that and play that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got you.
I want people to trust their instincts. A lot of times people know more than they think they know.
Because everyone has that certain song that they think of when they're in a certain mood, and the chords of that song resonate with certain emotions. I think that's kind of universal.
Good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's
So,
interesting because that's interesting that's for us in our Western culture. It changes when you go to India. Think about that. Their harmonic scale is different than ours.
mm-hmm,
So what might sound beautiful to us doesn't sound beautiful to them, and vice versa.
mm-hmm.
Anyway, go on with your next question. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. When you first have a film that you're going to score, what is your process for going about creating that score? Do you have a certain template that you go off of in your head about I do this, this, and this, or do you just kind of just go with the flow?
I wouldn't say there's a template for anything more than I first just dig into the characters. That's the first thing I do. Is I look at the characters and what are they going through? What's their transformation? What is the tension of this film? And what's the tension of this story? What can I get behind emotionally with the protagonist? I look at it completely from a character and story basis to begin. And then and that's just if I'm reading a script. And then if I'm getting to watch a film, oftentimes I will watch it with no music a couple times, and then I'll sit down in the studio for a day of just putting out what did I feel? What was my first reaction to these characters? And I'll think about what instruments I'd maybe use to represent them. And then I'll start going, okay, let's listen to it with the temp music and see where the music editor or the director or the editor, whomever with power be, decided where music might want to start and stop, and I'll compare that to what I did so I can bring my notes to them and say, you might want to start this cue later because there's something else happens here that we don't need to trigger yet, And I think a lot about what's the emotion of each scene. So I dig pretty deep. I kind of do an analysis of all the characters and of the story. That to me is more important than anything else. And then after that is when I start writing music and writing ideas.
Is the process of writing music, is it pretty universal throughout all genres of film, or is there certain processes that are different? Like, say, if you have a suspense movie versus a comedy.
That's interesting. I still approach it the same, but as far as character and story, but they are so drastically different to score musically because, like in Blockers, I'm really just, there's so many funny things happening that I want to just support the spirit of that, and I want to support some of these jokes, and I want to support the emotions characters going through. I did a horror film or a thriller for MGM once, and it was more about the director went, I want to scare the living daylights out of everybody right here. This is a jump scare, or having a conversation with a director, which I love, where I remember saying, hey, I actually wrote an idea for a scene once, and the director goes, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, you haven't seen what we've done. We changed in Act 3, but you're playing the guy touching the doorknob completely with fear. He goes, but in reality, he still has confidence. He doesn't have anything to be scared of yet. Here's why. And I'm like, oh, geez, And so, your motive is so different. In one film, you want people to feel like they're on a roller coaster ride, and other times you want them to laugh, and other times you want them to feel the anguish and feel like, oh man, this person's heart is breaking. I've had my heart broken too, so I don't feel as alone now. There's all sorts of reasons for people making a film, and it's really just trying to dig in and see why did that writer write it, and why is this director directing it the way they are.
I haven't seen Blockers yet, but when I was on your site earlier today, I was going through the tracks that were available for it, and I think it was number 7. There was this very, very melodic acoustic guitar track, and I kind of want to know where that fit into the story.
Well, basically, when I first saw Blockers, there were 2 things about it that struck me. One is it felt like a 90-minute hilarious chase scene. Like, it just felt like a constant chase. from these parents to their kids. But when you get into the final acts of film, like, they're so in the resolution of these characters, and these girls, like, you know, trying to figure out sex and why is sex considered bad, but their parents are good, or, you know, why they're trying to stop them. And there are these really beautiful moments between kids and parents talking to one another about something that feels so scary or taboo. Like, I mean, the last person you want to talk to about sex is your mom or dad, and then you see these conversations happen. And so there's room for emotion there. Like, because these parents weren't like, we don't think sex is bad. They're just like, we just want to protect you. You know, like, we just love you so much. And then, like, they were kind of like, I don't know why, you know. And it was cool because it was like, these girls are like, hey, I'm empowered. I can control my own body. I'm old enough, you know. And there were these beautiful moments where playing a melodic guitar works really well because it supports the emotion very well.
When you're looking for feedback on something that you've scored, where can composers go to get that? Because when I write a review or reviews I've seen, the score is usually not spoken about that often. So how do you get your feedback to know how the reception was of your music?
I guess a couple different ways. I mean, the main feedback I'm always getting is from my director. And then I'll say, like, when I'm on a studio film, then it's producers, it's studio executives, everyone wants to chime in, mainly because you're one of the last things they can possibly control. Like, your music is this fairly important component when it comes to the emotion of the film, and even the pacing and the tone. Yet it's one of the last. I mean, it's already shot, it's already edited, it's in the can, everything's done. All that's left is sound effects, which doesn't change. Maybe in a thriller or horror, it changes things a lot, but sound effects, dialogue, and music is what's left for the mix. So, really, I gauge it from there. But also, what's strange to me, especially since I think just the way the world works now, you know, in our era, is I just get random social media things from people. They're like, I saw this film and I heard your music and it really affected me, and I was going through something like the character was going through. You know, you hear that, and I love this piece so much. And a lot of times they're like, can I hear it outside of that? You know, and so sometimes you get feedback from people that are just fans of those films and those shows. But I don't know. I've never really needed any feedback because outside of my directors and my producers and whatever studio I'm writing for, if they're, you know, like, as long as they're happy with it, we launch it out into the world, it's going to be what it's going to be. And, you know, as a film composer is a very different job than, like, I don't know, I played in a band years ago, and, you know, you cultivate fans, and then you tour around, and those fans come out and see you, and they buy records, and they buy, well, not much anymore, and they buy merch, and, you know. But in film scoring, I mean, one of the reasons I was drawn to it is I used to perform a ton, and then I was like, wait a second, I can just be in a studio, light a candle, and write this really creative thing, and then there's this kind of satisfaction that comes through knowing my music is playing all over the world all the time. Just when I look at, like, the 200 episodes plus of television and the over 30 films and, you know, all the different things that are out there that people can watch on everything from, you know, HBO to Netflix and Amazon, all the different places they can get them, besides going out to movies. There's kind of a satisfaction in that, I guess. But really, as far as feedback, it's from the directors I've worked with, or the directors that hear my music and go, I want to work with you. I want you to write music for my film because I like what you did on this other one. That's pretty good feedback in and of itself.
Composer John Massari is he rescored Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and he's having a live orchestral performance of that score at the Mateo, or I'm sorry, jeez, it's been a long day. Oh my God! At the Maltabon.
Who is the composer you're talking about? I didn't hear who you said.
John Massari.
Okay.
So he's he took the Killer Clown score that he wrote with a synthesizer back in the 80s, and he had a orchestra, or he worked with an orchestra to redo it, and he's having a live performance at the Montalban. Are there any of your scores that you would like to compose live in front of an audience?
Oh, any of mine or different ones?
Or anything that you'd like to actually conduct.
I mean, I've written 20 symphonies and premiered all 20 of them. So I write a new symphony every year and premiere it every year. So I actually have a big outlet. It's in a symphony hall, seats about 2,500 people. And I choose a new subject every year. I wrote one called Symphony of the Superhero years ago. In fact, if you want, remind me, send me an email and I'll send it over to you. Okay. Because I recorded it eventually over in Europe and then gave it to Sony for licensing. But I have that outlet. Although if I were to take any of my film scores, there's probably two that I would actually love to put out or to perform live. One is a film I did called And While We Were Here, and it was all shot on the Isle of Ischia in Italy, and it stars Kate Bosworth, and I called it the 90-minute perfume ad. Like, it was just beautiful. It was a gorgeous film, and the director and I had just finished the film, and then we were set to do another one like a year and a half later with like Vince Vaughn and Sam Rockwell, like this really big cast, and it was in between, and we did this other small one, and she just kind of gave me complete license. Like, she had some notes, but really she's like, just be as artistic as you can. And so I wrote a film score that I was just, I was so happy with. It came out beautifully. I remember going down to meet the director, and there was a piano near where editorial was, and I was just hanging out, and I was playing piano, and the first thing I played, I just finished a symphony, and the first thing I played was some of that symphony, and she ran into the room, she's like, "What is that?" And I go, "Oh, I just premiered a symphony like 2 weeks ago. It's still in my fingers, so when I sit down, it's just kind of what comes out of me." And she goes, "Can you do something like that?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no director's asked me to do something this melodic and big, for a film lately." She's like, "No, it's perfect for this film." And we discussed it, and so that was a lot of fun. The other one was a show I did for NBC a few years back called Crossbones. It starred John Malkovich as Blackbeard the Pirate, and it was a crazy job where I just finished a show for them, and then the head of music over there at NBC said, "Hey, are you, I know you're available, but hopefully, as far as just finishing our show, we have this project and it needs some help." So then I did a phone call that within a day, and I was talking to the director in Ireland, the writer, producer in New Zealand, and then some of the other producers who were still down in Puerto Rico where they were shooting it. And then I did the call, and I was got on an airplane, and by the time I landed, I found out I was on the job. And I had 33 days to write 300 plus minutes of orchestral music. And it was one of the craziest jobs I've ever been on. But because I had to write so much music for this project, it forced kind of some really great choices that I wouldn't have had time to toil over. Like, it just was instinctual orchestral writing, but also for this big swashbuckling pirate epic, giant ships battling each other. And it was really fun. And that I think would be a lot of fun to perform live.
When you write your music, do you do it by hand, or do you do it on the PC?
I don't read music, and so I basically play everything in by a keyboard, and my studios are all Mac.
For people that are looking to get into music, that get into it as a profession, what would be your advice to those people?
Get into music or get into film? Because I don't ever consider myself in the music business at all. I'm in the film business.
To get in the entertainment industry.
it's funny. When I moved to Hollywood, if I would have known the odds against me, I might not have gone. But then I remember I knew it was going to be tough, but I was like, well, somebody's got to do it. And I remember giving myself like 7 years. I was like, if nothing happens in 7 years, I'll do something else. And funny enough, like right around before the 7th year is when Juno came out. But I'd say the key to success that I've seen over and again are the people that stay, the people that persist, the people that don't wait for anything. They just go make things happen. I just finished a show that's going to be on Google for a friend of mine who I watched her making comedy videos like a decade ago, and I would help her with music on them. And she was just like, she was auditioning for a bunch of things, and she would get little things here and there, but she wasn't getting it much, and so she would make her own. She wasn't waiting around for someone to choose her at an audition. She was making her own stuff, and she was like a really pretty like actress, but she was super funny, so she had this kind of double threat, but she was never getting cast for that. And so she put her own stuff out, and eventually Pete and Bob Farrelly had her in a couple of their 2 or 3 of their movies, and then now she's on she has a recurring role on an ABC show called, I think it's called American Housewives. Mm-hmm. And she has her own show coming out, and we just finished it, so it'll probably come out this summer. So all to say is, don't wait for anyone. Just go start making the content. The ability to make and create, the playing field's been so leveled in the last decade that if you put it out and you hustle that, that's what, for me, it was just hustling in technology. If this technology didn't exist, I probably wouldn't have a job. And then just hustling. When I was saying how I did short films for a company, for Fox Search Lab, basically I was doing them for this company, Atom Films, in this other part of Universal called Hypnotic, and I heard about Fox Searchlight was starting a short film division that they were going to try to foster feature films out of. And I found out who the executive was in charge, and I posed as an assistant to a friend of mine who was a writer. He had written a really great movie called Grocer A Blank, and I posed as his assistant, got on the lot. He went to his meeting, and I snuck over to the Fox Search Lab offices, went in, introduced myself, had music with me, and it was funny. The executive, she even said, she's like, "How did you get in here?" And I told her, I was honest with her. I said, "This is what I did." I go, "I just really want to work with you." And it was amazing. She was like, I ended up doing, I don't know, like 4 or 5 projects for them, over a couple of years before they folded. So it's just hustling, like just taking chances, taking risks. And I constantly honed my craft. Like in the early days, I wasn't getting, I couldn't really convince somebody to hire me. So I would just go and find footage of films and write to it. I would just write. I would even, record something, find a way to convert it to QuickTime. It was back before we used everything out of our computers. And then I'd turn the sound down and I'd write to it. And then I'd show it to my short filmmaker friends and say, "What do you think of this?" And we'd talk about it. And, I never went to a class for it, but I feel like I probably did more work than anybody ever did in the homework setting about film music, because I just was constantly doing it, knowing that I was eventually going to be doing it for a living. And it's tough because you just don't, there is an element of luck too, because I always look at people like, I would say, look, you better be talented. You better be good at what you do. But everyone here is talented. They got here for a reason. So now show why you're better. Show what angle you have. What's helped me is I have a business degree, not a music degree. So I thought about it from a business perspective and just kind of built my clientele that way, I guess.
My final question is, if you were to be given the chance to rescore any movie, yours or someone else's, what film would you most like to create your own score for?
Oh, that's a really cool question. Part of me wants to say like an epic saga, like The Godfather. Part of me wants to say National Lampoon's Vacation because it was my favorite movie as a kid. Give me 1 second to think about it. Yeah, it's a really cool question. I'm trying to think of maybe a film like E.T. I would
really,
say
a Spielberg film.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that out as in, I'm not doing any comparison of even of John Williams' score. I'm just talking about that was a film when I was a kid that just brought me to tears. Back when I was a little boy and it wasn't cool to cry. I was old enough where it wasn't cool to cry, and I'm with like my buddies, and we're all just like trying to hide that we're sobbing, and it was just this amazing adventure, this beautiful story of friendship. Like I don't want to rescore it because I think it would be better than John Williams. If you were saying pick any movies to redo, that would be one I would do. Just if you're saying for the world, like, could I do better than another? I don't even want to jump into that.
Oh, no. I meant something that would be a passion project. And I could see why E.T., because it runs the gamut of so many different genres throughout the entirety of the film, from suspense and somewhat horror to comedy to adventure, and then just this very heartbreaking goodbye at the end. I could see why that would be something to tackle with your kind of talent.
Yeah, that was, and that's one of my favorite parts of this job is it's about emotion, and if you're in touch with your emotions and not afraid to talk about them and play and write music that you feel from them and that other people can find an entryway into, then it allows you to help that director have people get into those characters. It allows you to have somebody watching to go, like when I do this show Casual, it's a very strange method, but I don't tune the instruments, and I have like cello and mandolin and guitars and mandocellos, all these interesting instruments, and I don't tune them. And what it is these characters are a little bent, and they're vulnerable. And so if I play where I mic things super close, so like you don't just hear the tone of the cello, you hear the bow and the rosin crossing the string and vibrating, and you hear like fret noises, and you hear all, I never quantize anything. I keep breaths, I keep mistakes, and it makes it feel so human that you feel, and it feels intimate. And just by the nature of that intimate music being played behind these characters, you feel like you intimately know them. And that's just one project I do. I approach all of them in different ways. But that's what I love about this craft, is you can dig so deep in, and so many times people aren't going to notice one thing or the other, but they're going to feel it without a doubt.
All right, Mateo, I appreciate you sitting down with me. Sorry, it's been a really long day.
No problem.
Oh man, I don't know why I can't keep my words straight today, man. I appreciate you sitting down with me today to talk about music. And where can people go to find more of your work or find out more about you?
Where can I go? I have a website that has like almost all the films on there that you can hear music from all the films, just MateoMessina.com. And then other than that, if you go to IMDb, it shows all, or probably my website or IMDb, they show all the different films I've done, all the different shows I've done. If you Google me, you'll find like I've done a TED Talk that tells a little bit of the same story I told you about not knowing how to write a symphony, but just kind of figuring it out as I went. Those are probably, and then I have soundtracks out there, but I don't really, like Lakeshore's released them and other companies have, but I don't really follow where those are distributed or anything.